Do I homeschool the way that I used to teach school? What do you think?
Every change has a reason. Baby, let it come to you.
You know, I get asked a lot, do you homeschool your son the way that you used to teach school? Do you do the same things that you did in the classroom in your home? And the answer mostly is no, but there are some things that I have brought from the classroom that I believe are important for him to learn and a skill that he's going to need for the future to be able to function in society. One of the things I do different is basically I'm not hindered by a set schedule. I'm not told that I have to be there at a specific time, that PE is at this time, art's at this time, music is at this time, lunch is at this time. I can do what I need to do in my own home and for my own son, and that's kind of nice. We can actually finish school, obviously, a lot sooner than children who go to public school would finish. One of the positives with that is that I can move at his own pace. I'm not set to, say, specific grade levels. Yes, technically he's in second grade, but honestly, we've been able to move beyond that. And then there's like maybe one thing where he might be, bottom of the row of his grade level. But I mean, we've eventually caught up on the things that were difficult. And then many things we've just surged ahead. And, when we finish one thing, well, we just move on to the next thing. And that's just kind of how we do it. I'm also not told what curriculum I have to use, and I love it. So every 5 or 6 years, I can't remember anymore, the school or the county would say, okay, we have to pick a new math curriculum, we have to pick a new science curriculum, it's time to get an updated version. And they would give us all the options, and then as a school or as a county, we would vote what we were going to use. And I tell you, most of the time, my choice was not chosen. And I would have to do with what I didn't exactly think was the best. Yes, I could supplement to a certain extent, but, I didn't like it. Another thing that is different is that I am not observed by administration or by, say, maybe a mentor teacher. I think that is important in a sense to make sure that, teachers are doing what they're supposed to do. But it's such a stressful thing. And honestly, it starts pitting teachers against teachers. You have to have nowadays, and it depends on the state, you have to have like super decent observations and to be able to get your next step increase in pay. And it just becomes an extremely stressful environment. And honestly, I didn't thrive in the classroom. I loved when my door was shut and I could do whatever I needed to do as a teacher for my students. But then there was all these high stress things that were I was constantly filled with anxiety all the time. And I don't think every teacher feels that way, but I think a good majority does. And I feel for our teachers definitely because, you just need to be able to do your job. In Finland, they have some of the best standardized test scores because their teachers are handpicked, they're put through school, they're given at least a master's degree. And then when they shut the door, no one bothers them. They are expected to do whatever it takes. They are trusted to do whatever it takes to make sure that their students are learning whatever it is that they need, they can do. And they also at one point had the highest, it was like the highest population of refugees that didn't speak English, and the ability to get them on grade level and to be academically achieving was like ridiculously high. So some of the ways that I think that we do it in the United States, I think, are not helping our students. As a homeschool mom, that sometimes it takes some unorthodox methods to be able to help your child achieve maybe a certain skill. Sometimes it takes a longer period of time for them to learn it. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with going outside and jumping up and down and spelling out your spelling words, or, whatever it takes, doing it in the car or making up a song, but you can't do that in public schools. There's just not enough time. And you have too many students, so it is very difficult. Along the lines of curriculum, you can change curriculums if it doesn't work. And I have. I have probably tried, I think 4. And what we're using now works great. Will it always work? I don't know. But that's okay, because I have the option to change if I want to. I also can do school anywhere. In the car, in the backyard, on the floor, on our bed, on vacation. I can do school anywhere. And sometimes it's just a conversation we're having in the car, where I'm kind of testing his knowledge of the things that he knows and asking him questions to elaborate on things. It's wonderful. Another thing that I do different is I don't push reading on him. When I was teaching, we had to do what was called AR testing, Accelerated Reader Program. I couldn't even tell you if it's being used today, but it seemed like a wonderful idea. So students would take a test on the computer and they would find out what their reading range was. So say my son is in 2nd grade, maybe his reading range was from 2.2 to 3.5. And each book in the library in your classroom was labeled with whatever its reading level was, and then it was assigned a point value. Well, according to how they did on the test, they would have so many points that they had to read in a month. And what it did is it started stressing kids out on, I gotta read. I don't have enough points. I've got 1 more day. I gotta get 3 more points. And it wasn't fun. They couldn't read whatever they wanted. They couldn't read lower if it interested them. They couldn't read a magazine. They couldn't read the cereal box. It had to be specific books. And what I saw is that it killed the love of reading for 95% of the students. Now there was 5% that loved reading and always wanted to get as many points as they could because they were super competitive, and those kids thrived in that. But other kids that it just wasn't as fun. And maybe if they had been led along easier, they would eventually have gotten to the place where they love it. And so I'm so grateful that I'm not forced to push that on him. I can let him read whatever he wants. I give him, I help guide him on what books he's picking or topics and things like that. There are books I don't want him to read. There are books that I don't think he's ready for, but I let him read what he's interested in. And then he comes back and he tells me all these amazing things that he learned. Right now, he loves nonfiction, and I think that that's great. I can tell you that his reading and vocabulary and spelling and reading fluency, all of that has increased because I just ask him to read for 30 minutes each day. Now he does more on his own, but because he has to a certain extent, he has improved a lot. But I've let him read what he wants. Another major thing that I do different is that we're not stuck inside 4 walls. Oh, I used to hate that. I was always opening the blinds to my windows because I always felt trapped and stuck in under the fluorescent lighting. I hated it. All I ever wanted to do was take the kids out and sit under a tree and do math or science or whatever, just because it was a lot more fun. And I think that they would have enjoyed it a lot more, but that's kind of frowned upon. So it is nice that we're not stuck just, sitting in 4 walls. That's why I don't have a designated classroom or a homeschool room in my house, because I don't want to be hindered and stuck to one place. That's nice. It keeps you organized. It probably helps a lot of other families that maybe have a lot of kids or, need a lot of structure, but it's just so much better for our family not to have that. Now, some things that I do the same. I'm looking at my notes. I give tests. Now that's a hot topic in the homeschool community. You know, the people that want to unschool and don't want to give tests, or the people who want to recreate the classroom at home, you know, and they want it to be exactly like school. I'm somewhere in between, but I believe that tests are a part of life. Even time tests, I believe, are a part of life. Learning to have a schedule and things that you have to achieve in a time limit, I think that that is a part of life. How are you going to have a job if you're just so used to doing whatever you want, whenever you want, and however it works for you? Going out into the real world is going to be awful if you don't have some of these skills. Now, not saying that you have to give your kid tests, but it might be a good idea. So I always do a spelling test. I do math tests. I do just like random knowledge checks, like, you know, asking him, like oral tests. I ask him questions and he gives me the answers. I'm just doing a check on knowledge. Sometimes I do essay in a way, and that's in his journal, depending on what topic I give him. We do, in our state that we currently live in, we do have to do a standardized test at the end of every year. And regardless if my state had said you have to or you don't have to, I would still do it because I think it's something that he needs to know if he's going to go to college. They're not going to forego testing just because he was homeschooled and he doesn't like to do it. That's not how things work. So it's also good for me to be able to kind of see where he is, but also it's more a skill that I want him to have. I do read aloud lessons like I used to in a classroom where I would sit at the front and I would read from the textbook. I mean, I still do that, but it may not necessarily be at a table. I'm definitely not standing up. It might be in the living room, but I do read things aloud a lot. If you use The Good and the Beautiful, you know, you have to spend a lot of one-on-one time and there's a lot to read. They are changing some of that, but honestly, it was good for me and my son. I also give grades for tests. I have a grading scale and I put a grade at the top with I don't use a red marker, I think. Red is not nice, but with a colored pen, and he gets to put things on the fridge. I do it for math tests. I do it for anything that's kind of an assessment because he needs to see the quantitative results of what he has done. I think he needs to understand that concept because when you get into the world, you're going to be given scores and grades and, you know, achievement percentages that you have to get. So he's going to need to feel comfortable with that. I don't want him to sit down and take tests and have all kinds of anxiety. I will say the first test I started giving him was like in first grade, and it was a spelling test. And he cried every week for like 3 weeks because he just felt like there was so much pressure. But I kept having to say, like, it's okay if you miss some, I'm going to add them on to next week. Like, you will achieve them. I'm not going to punish you because you don't get a 100. So that was something that he had to kind of work through. Another thing that I expect him to do is sit still during instruction. Now, there's all kinds of research, especially about boys, where our classrooms, our public school classrooms, are not designed for boys in mind. Boys, especially growing boys, don't do well where they have to sit still and be quiet like girls. That's easy for girls. For boys, that's very difficult. Now, I don't want him to just be running around and doing whatever he wants. He still is going to have to learn that skill. I don't make him do it as much as they would expect in public school because he would have a difficult time with that. But he needs to be able to do that. He needs to be able to focus, sit still, and be quiet. If you're sitting in an audience, say you go to a play, is he just going to get up and run around because that's, you know, what he feels like? No, that's not socially acceptable. You know, people would frown upon that. You could get kicked out of the theater. So it is something that I expect him to do. It also shows respect to whoever is speaking if you can sit still and listen. So I do have him do that. The other thing that I do is I actually use curriculum that someone else has made. I mean, I can make my own. I can do units. I can make up my own tasks, which I do a little bit, but honestly, I have an infant. You know, I need some of those things to already be done for me. And if you find the right curriculum, then I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel every single time. I don't think you need to make everything. I mean, there were teachers in the classroom that I worked with that made everything. They never used anything like a worksheet or a test that came with the curriculum. They made up their own lessons. They didn't use anything that was in the book. And they spent a tremendous amount of time at school working. And, you know, that's great. But I also think that that's like a hindrance to your family. So homeschooling is so that you can spend more time with your family, not so you're locked up somewhere like making all kinds of stuff because it makes you feel good. You know, I think that's glorifying busyness. But just remember, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you're literally just reading the lesson and having them do it, what's wrong with that? It's what they're doing in public school. Can you change it if your child doesn't understand it? Of course. Can you have them do less problems on a page? Of course. There's lots of things you can do, and that's the beauty of homeschooling, but I do use like a bought curriculum, and I do mostly use it. I never buy the teacher's guide, I will say that. I have enough experience teaching and homeschooling that I can just look at it and I know what I need to do and I just go. I don't do a lot of planning ahead of time. So that's probably one of the differences. I had to spend more time planning because things had to be written out. You had to have standards written in your plan book. So I had to spend more time doing that. If I didn't have to do that when I was a teacher, I wouldn't have done it because things change and there's no point. And one of the other things which I have done in a record keeping video is I write down what we do in a lesson plan book because that's just a habit that I have. Now I don't plan out the week. I just write down what we did so that I can document. And then of course I keep copies of his work throughout the year so that I can put it in a portfolio. And I did that for my students too. But that's just documentation, and that is something that I still do. That's the same. Okay, if you're a former teacher and now you homeschool, what are the things that you brought with you from the classroom and what are the things you were like, no, never again? If you're a homeschool mom who went to public school, what are things that you pulled in from your experiences from school that you loved that you continue doing in your home? What are the things you do different? I would love to hear your comments. Please put them down below. It also is so fun to have a conversation in the comments because we're all learning from each other. I've had people leave comments and I've thought, oh, that's a great idea. I should use that. So please don't ever be afraid to leave a comment. If you like this video, please hit the like button because it definitely helps my channel. Thank you for watching my video. If you're not already subscribed, please do. That would be great. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Every change